Okay, hello and welcome to the NVR Podcast, Season 2, Episode 22. My name is Rachael Aylmer.
And I'm Peter Jakob.
And today we're talking about the struggle. We are. The struggle, the one...
After we struggled with the IT this morning.
And we're now using the Zoom platform to record and not the other one. Okay, so the struggle...
platforms are available.
Yeah. And the struggle isn't going to be IT related, is it, Peter?
No.
No, go on, tell us what this is going to be related to.
Well, it's the struggle in NVR, or actually thinking of seeing and experiencing the whole NVR process as a struggle.
Mm.
And
so you're describing that from a practitioner's position or a parent's position, or both?
I think both. And I mean, you mentioned earlier as we were chatting prior to the recording that many, I don't know whether you meant many new NVR practitioners or many parents seem initially at least to approach NVR from a behaviorist position.
Totally, yeah. I was referring to both, actually, practitioners and parents.
That corresponds with my experience, I think. So I was just wondering what you've sort of picked up in terms of that kind of behaviorist position, what that actually means in how they deal with things.
So I think in really basic, simplistic terms, which is always my favorite position to take, is let's describe some of my experiences with some parents and caregivers, that they enter this relationship with me, with their practitioner, with a mindset that I think they come wanting strategies, me to tell them what to do, and that they'll go away and do it. And perhaps I sense with an image of fixing the child.
Yeah.
So it's about changing the behaviours of the child. The behaviour needs to be changed. Fix the child. Tell me what to do. I really experience that quite often in my work.
Yeah. So this idea of strategy, the idea of fixing the child, what comes to my mind is often when parents say, or practitioners say, NVR practitioners, we did this, we did that. We made an announcement and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And then the question that arises is, what is the understanding of it works? What does that mean, it works?
Yeah.
Often the expectation is, I will do X and the result will be Y. There will be a favorable result. I sometimes caricature it as parents, the idea that parents would make an announcement, the child would sit there quietly in a friendly way.
Yeah.
And the child would say, yes, mother, yes, father, I understand the error of my ways, and I shall from now on be kind and friendly and no longer ever and not ever again punch you in the face or go out and buy drugs or whatever it is. And there seems to be an expectation that there would be some kind of inkling of that.
A fix. There'd be a fix.
That the strategy works in that sense, when actually the young person is much more likely to sit there and say, what the fuck are you doing? Get the you effing B, or I'm not having this, or leave the room, or whatever it is. That is what will happen, because that is the nature of the patterns of interaction that have evolved over time.
Absolutely. And thinking about practitioners in a training setting, as we describe an announcement or a sit with, a sit in. I like to call them sit with.
Yes.
Parents, practitioners will often say, well, if I get a parent to sit in their room and read, their statement of intention, their announcement of love, of their pledge of change, then the child will just walk out. And the mindset of the practitioner that's not going to fix the problem. The mindset of the practitioner to respond, the child will leave the room. So therefore the child dominates the success of the parents' growth of their own agency. So if the child leaves the room, then that leaves the parents where?
Yeah.
Helpless? I don't know. Forlorn? Broken? What?
And so what you're saying is that particularly the practitioner who has just recently come to NVR
Training,
has similar expectations to the parents. And what do they, what goes on inside of them? I mean, is it a sense of personal failure? I'm not competent as a practitioner if I can't influence the system in such a way that the young person shows immediate positive responses? Or is it a sense, oh, well, maybe this whole NVR thing doesn't work, or maybe the parents will think that I'm not competent? What are the thoughts and feelings that are inside of that happen inside of the practitioner?
Well, I'd be a millionaire if I knew the answer to that, but my instinct is it's all about logic of control, that we're adults and we therefore parent our children and we tell them right from wrong and we guide them. And of course, in many ways, that's how I parented my children, and blessed with two grounded kids that I wasn't faced with violence. But the logic of control, I think, is about, I will make you do the things that you need to do. And if I can't make you do them, I will force you to do them. I think there's a deep-seated belief in our systems that's what we do to people.
Or I will love you into doing it. So I will make loads of reconciliation gestures. I'll put in a lot of positive statements about you in my announcement before I say what I won't accept. And that will make you somehow. That will make you become more civil, kinder, more cooperative with me as a parent.
Yeah.
So really, it's about not just overcoming the logic of control and those discourses in society that are still prevalent. I mean, old authority discourses.
Yeah.
Yes, it's about recognizing or experiencing or learning what goes on in the NVR process. What is the nature of this process? How is it different from ordinary everyday parenting? What's going on here? And how does the parent change with experience? How does the practitioner change with experience of the parent's experience? And ultimately, hopefully, thereby invite the child to take a different trajectory. I think that's the question perhaps that we're looking at right now.
It is the invitation of shifting my relationship with my young person.
Yeah. Is this a good point to bring in that idea of a struggle? That we're looking at a prolonged struggle. We're not, there are no fixes.
No fixes, and it is a prolonged struggle, which the theme of persistence and perseverance for me are at the forefront of my thinking when I'm working with a parent.
I'm just thinking, so even the idea of coming, the parent's idea of coming to the NVR practitioner, asking what is the right strategy, that seems to me to be already part of the old problem, and as you say, rooted in the logic of control. because the parent has tried many strategies.
Yeah.
They've tried many fixes, and each time they were deeply disappointed, hurt, unsettled
Yeah.
by receiving an unfavorable response from the young person. So those attempted fixes became part of the problem, and perhaps the whole idea of finding a single strategy or set of methods that will immediately turn things around and change the child, that thinking and that attitude and positioning of the parent, and where it's shared by the practitioner, that has become part of the problem. And if parents come to us looking for that strategy, and we feel we need to offer that strategy, I mean, don't use strategies in NVR, but that curative strategy, then we all go down that rabbit hole. And we don't recognize that the nature of the process is one of struggle. And I'm just thinking of conversations I've had with Dan Dahlberger about the arc of NVR.
Yeah.
And there's one point quite early on that we identified where there's a kind of where parents don't just recognize that what they have been doing doesn't work, but they actually, in a sense, embrace it. So, in for example, in AA, there's they speak of surrender.
Yes. Yeah.
For example, the realization, I can't handle alcohol. I won't be able to drink. That's a point of surrender. Or other insights, where you surrender, again, this illusion of control.
Yeah.
And perhaps something about all these things I've done, everything that I've done in an attempt to immediately bring about better behavior in my child, I must give up all of that. I must give up. I must surrender that. And that embracing of helplessness, the acceptance, everything that I've done and how I've positioned myself so far has rendered me helpless. And because often people say I'm helpless, but then they do what they've been doing before as if they weren't helpless, as if it could make a difference. And really to give up, I think that's something that can, in many instances, feel very liberating. Because if I can't do it, I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
But it can also feel, in other instances, very distressing. It can be a very dark place, at least for a while or a moment.
I agree. I'm working with a client, I think, who are just experiencing being on the cusp of those emotions. Yeah, just being on the cusp of recognizing that they can't make their child change, and that possibly leaves them rendered with that feeling of sadness and helplessness and hopelessness. But I think that you described it, Peter, beautifully, and I think that feeling can be very short-lived, because I think what comes very quickly, I think, in my experience afterwards, is hope that perseverance and patience with NVR and shifting from insistence to persistence brings about hope for change.
So that's really interesting. You're saying the shift from insistence to perseverance brings about hope. How does that happen? I'm just wondering out loud. What is it about that shift that brings about hope? And how does the shift happen? How do we as practitioners help parents or other caregivers, foster carers, carers in residential services, maybe teachers? How do we support that shift? What do we do?
I think there's a series of things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think parents that I work with give a lot of themselves to the sessions by writing journals as an additional part of having one-to-ones sessions with me. And in those written journals are lots of reflections of parents' actions and thoughts and feelings. And it's through that I tend to communicate acknowledgement of their suffering, acknowledgement of their positioning, acknowledgement of their attempts to practice being non-violent, and also to resist. And I think I don't know the defined answer, but my belief is that I think that change comes about within. And I often talk to parents about relying on their instincts, relying on their intuition. And when they have demonstrated, when they've relied on their intuition to perhaps walk away in a moment of escalation, to remove themselves, what that felt like. And when they are connected to their bodies and their thoughts, that becomes a significant part of the shift.
So, I mean, you've just said so many so important things, and so the change happens within, you said.
Yeah.
And just reminds me of the silly joke of the Dalai Lama going to Domino's Pizza and buying a pizza, and the pizza guy says, "Oh, Your Holiness, what would you like?" And he says, I want one with all." And he turns around and he says, "One with all for His Holiness." And he gives him the pizza. And the Dalai Lama hands him a $10 bill. And pizza guy doesn't do anything because the pizza is only $5. And then the Dalai Lama says, "So what about my change?" And the pizza guy says, "Your Holiness, change must come from within." Okay, I know it's a stupid joke. But it's very important because the focus initially is on change in the child, isn't it? The child needs to change. And then there's a realization that I, as a parent, change. And I guess there's a hurdle there. I think there's a tight spot because there wasn't anything wrong with the parent necessarily in the first place. And often when we think about needing to change, maybe we or others think there has been something wrong with us. It's different. It's change which entails learning about the struggle, learning about this process in a very complex situation.
Yeah.
So most of the parents we work with have been, as Winnicott says, good enough parents. Or at the very least, they've tried their best. We're not talking about them needing to change because they've done anything wrong.
No.
It's about the need to change because you're in an extraordinary situation. And you're involved in a struggle against the problem behavior of your child, which is further complicated by the fact that you love your child, usually, that you, even if at this moment you may not be able, harking back to our last podcast, you may not be able to feel those feelings of love at the moment. You love your child, you want to care for your child, you feel a duty to care for your child, against whose problem behavior you're struggling,
Yeah.
and maybe victimizes you in many different ways. So it's an extraordinarily complex constellation. How could anyone be expected to engage in a prolonged struggle, struggle that takes time, where you have to cope with pushbacks, and very destructive behavior again and again and again? How, without learning, without changing, one must learn to
Changing. I think parents hear the word change and understand that as, I need to change myself, I need to change, everything I do. Changing, as you described it, as a learning experience, changing my thinking, changing, just changing the way I breathe, changing the way that I communicate, changing my tone of voice, changing not in a negative sense, just adjusting.
and my expectations.
Yeah.
And changing not just within the dyad between me and my child, but between me and other adults, between me and the child's father or mother, between me and people who I aim to gain as supporters. Change in how I communicate with the supporters, change in how I tell the supporters they could constructively communicate with my child, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's so multidimensional.
Huge.
To learn. And a lot of it is emotional learning. I mean, I'm just thinking, you said different ways of breathing, thinking different ways of interacting with the child. I'm thinking of different ways of holding my body. Let's say I'm doing a sit-in or sitting with, and I have a supporter with me as a witness and a stress buffer for all of us. And my child says something outrageous, and I feel this surge of shame. Don't use the word shame, they speak of embarrassment. But I feel this surge of shame in front of my supporter, and I need to learn to live with it. And I need to learn to regulate that shame, which under ordinary circumstances, I wouldn't have to. Because in ordinary circumstances, my child would not say this in front of my mate, for example. So there's learning there, and learning that, there are questions, aren't there? How does my friend see me when my daughter, my son says this? What do they think of me? And, oh, they think I'm okay. That's a learning process. When maybe hitherto I might not have involved my friend because I was afraid that my friend might be shocked. Well, they might be shocked by what my child says, but that they might develop a negative vision of me, or an entirely negative vision of my child, whose job it still is for me to protect. Gosh, complication over complication over complication, where I need to learn.
And change my thought processes around those preconceived ideas of judgment, how a supporter might judge you, but how they might not, how the supporter might support you in a different way.
So success and the notion of what constitutes success shifts. It shifts away from the immediate reaction of the child to an, to an appreciation of what I've learned, of what I am increasingly becoming able to do. Just thinking of Chaim Omer saying, if a parent does something that she hitherto thought she would never be able to do, that is where things start happening. So the confidence in the parent grows with their recognition of their own learning-based change.
Beautifully put, Peter Jakob. Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I'm still thinking about this question, going back to what you said, that parents and practitioners experience hope in the process of letting go of the preconceived notion of ability, of change, the ability to change the child in the here and now with some strategies. I'm still not clear in my mind, is this growing sense of competence that comes from my learning and from my ability to do things in ways that I hadn't felt able to do before, is that the basis of hope? Or does hope need any other ingredients?
Big question, I guess, and for every person it will differ. Maybe hope comes from feeling more connected to yourself and your young person.
Okay.
That brings about some hope. We often refer to small wins when a parent might reflect on their week and recognize a scenario which in normal circumstances could easily escalate into perhaps minutes, many minutes, hours of behaviors that are really challenging. And the small win was that perhaps the minutes were less, or that behavior never escalated.
So connection to myself, connection to the child. I'm thinking connection to parts of myself. So perhaps part of where I felt erased as a parent is that I hadn't felt connected with many of my values as a parent. I don't want to I never wanted to end up shouting back at my child. I never wanted to end up calling my child names. When my child had been calling me names in retaliation. I never wanted to end up aiming to hurt my child because my child had hurt me. If I can, as part of my change process, learn to de-escalate in the face of what feels like a real or is a real assault on my child, then that enables me to reconnect with those values as a parent and with the parent I want to be and the parent that I have been at many times. And so you're saying that that's where hope comes from, and from the reconnection with the child.
Well, I won't put money on it, but that's my that's my sense. That's been a reoccurrence in my practice. But,
I guess it would be a really interesting question for a piece of qualitative research. If someone wanted to interview parents about what was it in the NVR process that helped generate hope. Because I guess hope is what can sustain parents in the face of prolonged suffering. And it makes me come back to something you said earlier that we haven't picked up or spoken about further. You spoke about the parents journaling their feelings, including difficult feelings, and essentially, I don't know what words you use, but you witnessing that.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a dynamic whereby as the parent changes through learning to deal more and more effectively with a very complex situation, ultimately dealing with their own feelings and responses.
Yeah.
As that happens, we are there and need to provide that emotional containment with them. So on the one hand, we are guides through this really, really difficult territory, which we don't always know.
No. No.
We've just been guides before through other difficult territories.
Yeah.
So we know about the process of guiding, but we don't intimately know the new territory with
The
every
outcome.
working with the outcome or the intricacies and the ins and outs. But so we're guides, we're coaches, and we contain. We're there whilst they learn to bear. I think learning to bear. And I'm just thinking of some research into the psychology of nonviolence. And a psychologist who has researched the psychology of nonviolence is V.K. Kuhl. And Kuhl looked at what he calls the nonviolent personality and what factors are part of the nonviolent personality. And forbearance is one of those factors. And so it seems to me what we see in the course of the struggle is the growth of forbearance in the parent. And something about, you may call me this, or you may call me that. You may use the B word or the C word or the T word. And one would normally call you something back. One would normally try to change you so that you don't do this anymore. But I stand firm, and I will not let that rock me, shake me in the way it has shaken me in the past.
In the past. Yeah.
It'll still affect me. It's still troubling. It's still hurting. And I will renew my efforts at resisting that and being proactive and taking action. But I know it no longer rocks me in the same way, because I have that hope that in the longer term, the change that I experience in myself will make a difference of some kind.
Beautifully eloquently put. That the parent's response to change the child, and I wrote the words down: punish the child. When you wrong me, I will wrong you. And I think that's a very ineffective way of living.
Yeah.
But,
Or doing all the other things that the parents have done in the past, even if it's very different from punishing, if it's appeasing, if it's begging, if it's pleading, if it's trying to generate a sense of guilt in the child. Look at what you've done to me. All of these things, or then ultimately the idea of behavioral strategies, which should now immediately work. All these things.
Yeah.
I think we've sort of moved from surrender or embracing helplessness, really looking at accepting in oneself that all I've done, in a real wide sense, has not been helpful, And it's important to give up on all of that.
Mm.
Even though I have sort of said I was helpless, but I continued to do something of that nature. And if it's to ask a practitioner, what is the ultimate strategy? That's all part of what I need to learn to give up on, even if for a while it makes me feel even worse. It makes the place even darker. To developing hope by virtue of learning and by virtue of my own internal change, which is so multidimensional, to get to a place where my forbearance grows, and I move much more into the realm of developing this nonviolent personality, as V.K. Cool calls it. That's quite an arc, isn't it? You know, and ultimately, this whole process generating hope, whilst I'm in the relationship with a practitioner who also provides that emotional containment.
Yeah, that is the struggle.
That is the struggle.
That is the struggle.
And you don't know the outcome.
And you don't know the outcome.
You cannot exactly predict it.
But you can hope.
You can hope. Statistics show that child behavior, on average, tends to get much, much better.
Yeah.
You know, we see that in outcome research. But in the individual case, I can't predict exactly what's going to happen. That's probably part of the process as well. I just learn to live with doing what feels right more and more and more.
Yeah.
With the hope that it will invite my child into different ways of responding to me and to the rest of the world.
Of which your child may refuse that invitation for weeks.
But at least as the parent, I've done the right thing more and more.
For myself, for my values, for my beliefs, for my position, for the parent that I want to be.
Yeah.
Well, we've done a super duper long podcast today.
Okay. So I guess it's time to lay these issues to rest, and hopefully they can generate some more thinking. And I'm quite excited about the prospect of maybe some research that would ask parents about how hope was generated in the NVR process. So I'm approached again by someone who wants to carry out a small-scale research project on NVR as, I don't know, part of their psychology studies or whatever. I might suggest that.
Well, maybe we could suggest that parents and practitioners listening to this podcast may respond to that question on our info at PartnershipProjectsUK.com, which I will put in the podcast blurb, the question about what helps generate hope.
What gave you hope?
Yeah, what gave you hope?
Even when your child was not yet behaving better.
Yeah. Love it. Right, well, it's goodbye from me.
And from me.
And now I've got to work out how to stop recording.